So we're at the end of graduation season. Over the past few weeks, young grads have donned their hard-earned caps and gowns and have gathered on college greens to pose for an endless number of photos with proud family members and fellow co-eds and professors. Back in 2016, I produced a piece for the New Yorker Radio Hour, which featured an unlikely friendship between a professor at Vassar College and one of his students. So what made this bond so unusual? Well, even though Vassar, which is located in Poughkeepsie, New York, may be considered your typical liberal Northeastern college, the student body defies categories. But even among all of this student diversity, one particular student made a strong impression on English literature professor Hua Hsu.
Typical Vassar student, it's almost an oxymoron because the campus prides itself in being really diverse, really welcoming, really open-minded, pretty liberal/progressive campus vibe, a lot of interest in social justice, sort of an artsy school. It's very, very gay-friendly.
My name's David Carrell. I'm 35 years old, and I'm a senior at Vassar College now. Before I come into Vassar College, I was in the Army for 11 and a half years and spent 4 years deployed to Iraq as a 19-kilo tank commander. You know, I am a Republican, and I'm a Texas Republican.
We have 6 more presentations on Tuesday. In fall of 2013, Dave Carrell was one of 3 veterans who enrolled in my freshman writing class as part of the Posse Veterans Program at Vassar College. But what did you know about Vassar?
I knew nothing about Vassar. Nothing. A buddy of mine said, hey, man, he called me one day. He's like, hey, Vassar College is looking for veterans. You should apply. I said, is it a good school? He said, yeah. I said, done. Let's apply. And then I said, well, where the hell is Vassar at? I was like, I've never heard of that. So I Googled it and looked at the library, and I was like, looks good. Let's try that. Let's go to a woman's college full of Democrats. Awesome. Let's do that.
Actually, Vassar went co-ed back in 1969, but this reputation lingers on.
I've always wondered this. So, like I've told you in the past, I didn't really know that we had this program before showing up that first day. Mm-hmm. And, like you get pictures of all your students. And I remember printing out the pictures for your class, and I'm walking to school, and I look down and I see a guy who's like my age, his head shaved. But I remember you were also wearing a T-shirt with like the GOP elephant on it.
Yeah.
Did you do that on purpose?
Oh, yeah, you got to represent.
All the other pictures were like kids in their senior prom tuxedos and dresses. And then I see this, like a man, like someone, I couldn't tell whether your head was shaved or whether you're bald. And I'm like, this guy is not wearing this shirt ironically.
No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't ironic. If I'm the guy with the Republican shirt on whenever the teachers print out their little things, at least then they know that they're going to have to address that issue at some point, and it forces them to be honest a little bit more so.
It totally worked for me. I mean,
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the podcast where we tell stories about America's cultural divides. I'm Trey K. So, like oil and water, we have the makings here of an us and them culture clash before the backdrop of a liberal college campus in New York's Hudson Valley. But Dave Carrell, the elephant in the room, or the classroom, surprised Professor Hua Hsu, and Hsu responded in kind.
What was your impression of Vassar kids when you started?
I was impressed. I was impressed. It took a good, almost a whole first year just to be able to articulate my thoughts the way that they did. Just speaking that language is hard, So in the military, the more I cussed, the faster I get promoted. So that was, that's just how you talked. So it was just a different language. So you had to learn a different language when you came here just so that you could be able to get your point across. So my first impression of these students were, holy shit, these kids are smart. There's a lot to be learned from them.
I remember having to remind Dave and the other veterans that they were smart too, just in a different way. maybe a little rough around the edges. But I wondered if he was ever bothered with being around so many young college students.
So it wasn't so much dealing with 18 and 19-year-olds at college here, because I dealt with 18 and 19-year-olds all the time. There was a little bit difference where I couldn't just scream at them and make them do push-ups. I wish I could have done that a few times, but there's times where I walk through and I just hear a really ignorant conversation of, just not ignorant, just, no experience, no life experience conversation going on somewhere. And, and I just think, what it's like to be 19 again and try to figure it out.
I was doing an independent study with Dave, and, we just sort of, there was no actual final assignment. So I just said, look, you've mentioned in the past wanting to write about your experiences. Just write me, 5 or 6 pages and that'll be it.
I have files and files of just stuff because I don't sleep well some nights, so whenever I'm thinking about it, I just go try to write it just to get it down and out.
He sent me a document. It was one of the most disturbing things I've ever read.
I revisit it a lot just in my own mind. It plays all the time in my own mind.
And part of it was because I think he was aware of how disturbing it was.
I have tons and tons of just gibberish written, but so far they've just been going into a file on my computer that says veteran shit.
This was just an account of combat, of life as a soldier, of destruction that was unlike anything I'd ever read or seen.
You have highlights that you look back on your life. Some of my highlights are just happen to be really horrible things happening.
And when he turned the paper in, he included this note. Don't worry, man, I'm not a monster anymore. Haha. I've come to grips with my past. It's hard to tell my story to civilians because the first thing most of them think is
he likes killing. I wonder if he still wants to. War is a different place. Those actions are acceptable there. I have boxes full of medals from acting like that. They're all in my attic to be seen again whenever I move. I am not proud of a lot of things I did while I was deployed, but I am damn sure not ashamed of any of them. Most of the people I know now in my life know I was in the Army, but few of them know what you know now. If this paper has to be seen by anyone other than you, let me know so I can write you something else. This is for your eyes only. See you next semester.
Typically when I meet with students, I can kind of rely on being older than them to have a tiny bit more wisdom than them. With these guys, there was no age difference, and their life experiences were really different from mine. I didn't feel like I had that much to offer, other than just as someone who's willing to listen to them and take them seriously. What was the experience actually like?
Of being in a tank?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's miserable, but it's pretty miserable. So whenever you're, in August in Iraq, it's 110 outside, it's 125 in the tank, so it gets to be miserable. And after times, there's a lot of times where you did 24-hour ops, so you went out there and sat for 24 hours in one spot and just kind of scanned. And after a while, it'd feel like your brain is literally melting because it was just so unbearable.
So over 11 years, you were in Iraq for like 4.5 years?
Yeah, 4.
4 years. How many firefights were you involved in?
A lot. I would say that I pulled the triggers, around about 300 times. I think the best I can gauge IEDs that went off on my vehicle or near my vehicle is 32.
Like, what do you do to kind of keep it together? Are you just sort of anticipating the next rush?
Yeah, you're just anticipating the next rush because it can happen at any second. You kind of just sit in there and just talk and listen to the radio. So you could wire up a radio that would come through the headset in the tank, so you just play music.
What were you listening to?
Let the bodies hit the floor.
Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit
It was on somebody's iPod, but Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, man. You listen to that and just wait for the kickoff. You just be in the tunnel, waiting for him to call your name.
Like you would just listen to that one song over and over?
I mean, that was the theme of it. Say back then you had 180 songs on a thing, out of 180 songs on the iPod, that Let the Bodies Hit the Floor had to play at least 5 times. So if you had to put a theme song to the war in Iraq, it would be that. Everybody had their own taste, but in my tank it was nasty heavy metal.
Something's got to give. 3, something's got to give. Now! Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the...
Do you still listen to those songs now?
No, I can't listen to them anymore.
You know, up until this point, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of him. And what really shocked me about what he sent me was just how it seemed as though he actually would have wanted to go back.
So I missed the adrenaline of it. You know, it's the fear, the excitement, the pain. If you get to engage with the enemy at close range, it's like the best challenge that you can have in your life. And then on the other side of that is when it doesn't go right and it's really bad. So then you can go into the rest of your life knowing that it'll never ever be as worse as war, but there's also a little bit of it that you're never going to feel again, that you're going to miss.
I think what troubled me was the honesty, was his recognition that this was a part of who he was. I just felt really humbled, and I also just felt in awe that this guy had done all of these things, and now I was somehow responsible for him.
Even I remember going to your office the first semester and just looking around in your office and be like, oh yeah, this is the exact same, you know, you got the West Coast vibe on it, but you know, this is the exact same stuff that I have.
Now, Hua's office is chock full of books, vinyl record albums, baseball cards, posters, and various memorabilia that reflect his nostalgia for growing up in the 1990s. There's a lot of hip-hop in the mix.
You know, I was like, this is awesome because it's just random 90s things thrown in there, you know, just like you had a Master P doll. You know, I was like, yeah.
Dave's talking about a little doll that's made in the image of 90s hip-hop artist Master P. This thing is still packed in its original box. If you pull the string, this little Master P would sing his double platinum hit, Make 'Em Say,
One thing that I think is really important to note is that these guys weren't the types to sit around and swap war stories. In fact, Dave told us that before coming to Vassar, he'd been part of a veterans group at his previous school, and he had put up a sign on the first day that said, only one war story per day. He just wasn't really the type who wanted to live in the past.
So as I sat and recorded Hua interviewing Dave, I had the impulse to ask Dave if he'd mind letting me read the essay that he'd shared with Hua. And he gave me a flat-out no. And I asked why. And he said that I hadn't earned the right yet. This exchange got Hua to thinking.
You just said that, like, someone you don't know needs to, like, earn the right to access your stories. Why did you think I deserve to read? I mean, I know I assigned you something, but like
Master P doll in your room, dude. You know, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot. You know, it just has to be somebody that you can connect with, that you know it's not just going to be that's open-minded enough to see those things and say, well, that's really not who he is. That's just some of the things that he's been involved in. I think that's
it's all because of the Master P doll.
all runs around the Master P doll.
It's crazy that I barely remember that I have that doll in my I mean, it's because I have so much shit in my office, but I mean, did you think though, when we started like our class, that I would end up earning that right?
No, because I think you were the first professor that I had. I think you were the very, very first class that I'd taken at Vassar. You know, so and then here comes, you know, the stereotypical Northeast professor, you know, and I was like, oh, look at this guy, you know, and you didn't know what to expect for a while. And then after, you know, the third or fourth class, I think that's when I was like, hey, man, this guy gets it. You know, he understands what's, you know, all of this kind of looks like a little bit.
That first month, all three of you guys had a lot of challenges, and you would come talk to me, and I would feel really bad. But then after a while, it was like, feeling bad doesn't really do anything. I can't just like have pity for these guys.
And none of us want that. I don't know any veterans at all that are at top tier institutions that are looking for even a drop of pity. Nobody wants that at all. We just don't know what we're doing.
Like, how do you think being here has changed your sense of like politics or just sort of how you see the world? Or
So I've always had a moderate conservative viewpoint, always. And I just think that as far as what's really changed me from being here is knowing that the left and the right aren't that far off. There's the far left that's far left, and then there's the far right. But almost every single person that's here could be just categorized in the middle, because there's no one that I've spoke to that's far left or far right. So even the ones that I would assume was far left by Texas standards, once you get talking to them and speaking with them, there's compromise there. I don't think it matters if you got an elephant or the donkey on your shirt. I don't think it really matters. So I think that what I've learned is that I don't think it matters.
So at the end of this month, Dave and his fellow liberal Northeastern 20-somethings will be walking as part of Vassar's 2016 graduating class. He himself doesn't seem particularly interested in this ritual, but his mom and grandma are coming all the way to Poughkeepsie, and they're so proud they really want to see him cross that stage. We've talked about what he might do in the future. He's mentioned the possibility of getting an MBA, maybe law school. I've thought maybe he should write a book.
So as far as I've gotten now is I bought a house near Fort Worth so that I have the possibility to go to A&M Law. So I thought, try to go to law school and see where that leads me.
So Dave's got a lot of options, but in a way I don't think he's that different from a lot of the 20-somethings he'll be walking with. They've acquired a lot of knowledge, they've learned a lot about themselves, but at this point, they don't really know what they want to do next.
It's just that I want to go spend some time in my pool and float underneath the shade for a few years and figure out what I want to do with life. So I really don't know yet.
Spino Kaplan. David Allen Carrell, Jr. Henry Carrell.
So that was last year when Huasiu and I spoke with Dave Carrell. Coming up, I speak with him a year later. What's it been like returning to Texas after his education in the den of liberalism of the Northeast?
Whenever you watch a certain news channel and it sickens you and you can't watch but 5 minutes of it, that's not the liberals' point of view. The opposite is whenever people from the Northeast or liberals or Democrats watch Fox News, that doesn't represent all of us.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
In difficult times, music gives us peace, brings us together, and helps heal us. It calms our nerves and brightens our days. That's why we're bringing you classic episodes of Mountain Stage on air and in our podcast. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find something that's familiar or brand new and feel the power of live music on our website, mountainstage.org.
So after graduating in May 2016, Dave Carrell moved back to Texas. We decided to check in with him and to see if he had any residual effects from his time at Vassar College. Now he's living in Granbury, Texas, which is about 25 miles southwest of Fort Worth. I asked Dave if after 3 years in the liberal Northeast, did Texas look any different to him?
It does. It seems and feels, it feels night and day. When I was down here in Fort Hood, it felt to me like the Republican Party was really getting after it and going and doing great and wonderful things. And, it felt like there was diversity within the ranks a little bit so. And then when I get to Granbury, it's just that it's outside of the city limits a little bit more so. There's less diversity. And now I kind of feel like it's almost my responsibility to at least give a left's opinion on things since I went through for 3 years. So while I'm down here in Texas and while I am still a registered Republican, whenever I talk to people, I still try to say, yes, but there's also another opinion to all of these things. And let's not just spew what the media is telling us and take that as facts.
Just to be clear, I mean, what type of media do you find the people in your community listening to, reading?
Yeah, so it's all Fox News. If you watch Fox News for a half an hour in the morning and then go on with your day, you'll eventually run into somebody that said those bits of pieces.
What do you think the result of that is?
I think that breeds this notion of the whole world thinks like this. It becomes to where they can't accept another opinion or another idea. It's the exact same up in the Northeast. I mean, everybody watched MSNBC and CNN, and no one had a different perspective. So I think that the problem lies in just getting all your information from one source and not moving around and not fact checking any of it.
And again, you still consider yourself a Republican and a conservative, right?
I do, but I think that I've learned in my time in the Northeast, I think that I learned that most people are center. It's only that we're left and right because there's no other opinion, no other option. I'm a Republican, but I'm pro-choice just because I'm not a woman and it's not my place to make that opinion. I'm pro-gun registration because I've handled guns in my life and I know that it takes some responsibility to handle them. And I'm pro-EPA and I'm pro-environment just because there's no sense of destroying the only one that we have. So as a Republican, I pretty much stand against everything that the Republican Party stands for.
Well, part of what the Republican Party stands for. I mean, what are the parts of the Republican Party that you do stand for?
So I continue to stand for the smaller government. And, the people should stand on their own. And that while, yes, there needs to be some sort of social services and programs in place for people of need, those programs can be cut somewhat just to encourage individual responsibility.
You said at the end of the piece that the right and the left are not that far apart. Do you still feel that way now that you're in Texas?
I do. Even if you voted for Trump or Hillary, all of your ideas and all of your passions weren't rolled up in that vote. So you agreed with some things and you disagreed with other things. And I think that it's the same on both sides. But there's not another choice, so you have to pick one of the sides.
Speaking of the election, and you're somebody who did many, many years in the military, something that I've heard after the election from my conservative friends is now we have a president who the troops can respect. You're laughing. Why are you laughing?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, my small perspective on the military, I was only a staff sergeant when I got out, but I've had lieutenants that sat back and thought about what the mission was and the best way to do it, and then I've had lieutenants that have immediately heard the mission and jumped to it and said, we're going to go attack. And in my experience, it was always those lieutenants that were gung-ho and ready to go after every little target that were the most dangerous, just because the military shouldn't be used as the first option. We have a State Department and a massive bureaucracy that's designed to be the first level of international relations instead of the military. And to me, as a veteran, I don't want to go to war. It's a very immature person that believes that war will solve any problems.
It seemed clear that Dave's time in the Northeast had altered his perspective on Texas society and culture. But I wondered if there might be aspects of the Northeast that he misses.
There's two things, and the biggest one off the top of my head is New York had you can't talk on your cell phone laws. Texas doesn't. This is the most frustrating thing I've ever seen. Everybody on their phone driving. But next is open carry laws in Texas. As a soldier, I was in Iraq 4 separate times. So I spent 48 months of my life in war, in a country that I couldn't understand a word that the people said. I knew very, very little Arabic. But what I did learn to read is people's face and their eyes and their movements. So I could walk down the street and see if a guy was a threat or if they were just moving along with their day. And here in Granbury, there's a really neat town square down here. And, all around the courthouse is little shops and things like that. So I'm walking through there one time and I see like 2 or 3 people with handguns on their side. And I think that's strange. I haven't seen that in a long time. And my initial thought was, that's good. I like to see that. Well, then later on, I seen the same people walking towards me And I could see in their face and in their eyes that they were absolutely petrified of everything around them. That's very, very concerning to me, is people that aren't qualified and don't understand the responsibility of carrying a gun. And that's something that when I was down here before, I thought that it should be, almost a law that everyone has a gun on them at all times.
But are you saying that there's kind of like this heightened vigilance or
Exactly.
maybe heightened paranoia?
Yeah, and it was more heightened, I would say heightened paranoia. They're just looking around and, it's almost like the people that do it are waiting to be the hero. And I've been in situations where I've witnessed the hero, and that's not a great thing to be. You ever heard that little saying that everybody wants to be a gangster until there's gangster shit to do? And that's, I just feel like the more people that are untrained with guns, it just creates an unsafe environment for everybody else. So
that's a situation where you are observing your fellow Texans in the town that you live in. But I hear a lot of criticism from people on the right that our university systems are really breeding grounds for liberal thought. What do you think of that? In a way, you kind of felt that way before you went there when you put your Republican T-shirt on. That you kind of felt like that's what you were getting into, right?
It is. At least whenever you go to school like that. So, just for example, I was taking an American political theory class one time, and we was going over Jefferson and the Federalist Papers, and then one day was just we had to read articles that was such as like the shrinking Republican Party, why the Republican Party is in default, and things like that. And so that was on a Tuesday, and I thought, okay, cool. Thursday will be, let's see why the Democrats are, where their weaknesses are, or whatever. And then no, Thursday came, and it's back to Federalist 10. So at least at the school that I went to, it was a breeding ground for liberal thoughts. But in a way, too, is students don't take every bit of those ideas and move forward with them as their own. So if the universities in the United States now are preaching liberal ideas and kids come out of school and have an idea of let's help the less fortunate than us and protect the environment, I'm all for it. It's not bad things that they're teaching.
Well, and also, I think that there seems to be an idea that at a time in the world when we are having challenges with terrorism, that people who would be on the left would, I guess, coddle terrorists. Is that something that you?
Yeah. I think that a lot of Republicans, especially in the South, think of liberals and Democrats as just weak and not wanting to take the necessary steps to protect our nation and to protect our economy, and that they would coddle the institutions and the policies that would allow for, the demise of America. So it's very, very hard, because whenever you talk to somebody just about their life and their family and what they're doing, we all have the same goals. We just want to be happy. We just want to go raise our kids in a safe environment and do our thing. And both sides recognize the need for some social program. It's just a matter of how to implement those policies and how to get both sides to talk to each other. And I just feel like if there wasn't such hyperpartisanism, there would be a conversation that's meaningful going on in the United States. It's become one of those ideas that people can't wrap their minds around, and it's kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around that I left as a Republican and went up to New York, and somehow the liberals rubbed off on me. To me, that is at times annoying, because now I feel like I have this burden of the ideas that continue to separate the United States, and I feel like I'm in the middle of it.
Would you suggest that other people take a similar step to maybe embed themselves in the experience of the other part of America?
I think that, that would be the ultimate goal, is to actually try to go and move somewhere and actually embed yourself with another culture almost. But I think for right now, I would just like to see people change the channel. Whenever you watch a certain news channel and it sickens you and you can't watch but 5 minutes of it, that's not the liberals' point of view. The opposite is whenever people from the Northeast, or liberals or Democrats, watch Fox News, that doesn't represent all of us. That doesn't represent the Republicans. And it's those networks that are continuing to divide our country and make conversations and compromises difficult.
I've really enjoyed getting to know Dave Carrell. These days, when I speak with someone who identifies as a conservative Republican, it seems like the conversation often has a heightened us versus them feel to it. But Dave seems different. He seems above that. He's someone who comes from a position on the political spectrum that's different than me, but he's not looking to win partisan battles. I believe he's done more to invest time into finding common ground than many on the right or the left are willing to do. And I respect that. You know, I'd like to hear from more conservatives with this kind of perspective. If you are someone like this, or if you know someone, write to me, Trey, at usandthempodcast.com. You've been listening to Us and Them. The original segment was produced for the New Yorker Radio Hour by me, Trey K, and edited by David Krasnow and Avi Carrillo. Additional editing and production by Lori Stern and Mitch Hanley. Special thanks to writer and teacher Hua Hsu for introducing me to his student, Dave Carrell. Joni Deutsch is our digital producer. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Krisafi and Mariana Trofimova designed our website at usandthempodcast.com and provide us with images for the web. Our intern is Nicholas Tantillo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the Mentorship Program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From